There he goes. And we're also an educational facility. So by doing everything together, by bringing in the public and getting them inspired about what we do, by working with the researchers who are, top of the line in understanding what's happening in the wild, we're able to really use all of our work. Oh, look, there's a giraffe too. We work together in order to make all these things successful. So it's a pretty amazing place. And there's always so much to learn here at our park.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Breaking Silos with Sophia Jamil channel. As mentioned in the introduction, this episode is done in collaboration with the East-West Center as part of their Spring Virtual Institute for their academic fellows who are under the Young Southeast Asian Leaders Initiative, or YSEALI. So this episode is the second out of 8 episodes that we're working with the East West Center, and we'll be exploring various issues related to environmental sustainability and conservation and climate change. And what's exciting about these episodes is that many of the questions that will be asked to our guest speakers are from the fellows themselves. And these fellows are young Southeast Asianists who are doing great work in terms of environmental sustainability and conservation in the region. So we're very happy to have Lauren Lee with us here today from San Diego. Lauren Lee is an educator and wildlife advocate at the San Diego Zoo and Safari Park. She's got really exciting things to tell us about the innovative work that the zoo is doing with regards to wildlife conservation. So Lauren, thanks for your time. It's an early morning in where you are. You're on site at work. Please tell us a bit about yourself and how did you get into the line of work that you're in now?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me introduce you to my amazing office. It's a pretty awesome place where a lot of really cool stuff is happening. So although it is early in the morning, it is okay. My name is Lauren, and I've been working at the safari park for about 5 years. But I haven't always been in the field with these animals. I started as an educator because I wanted to do something to work with animals. And I felt like that was the best way to start and really understand the field of conservation. After a few years of doing that, I jumped into the mammal husbandry side to work even closer to the animals, to then apply my knowledge that I had learned to better take care of them. So it's been pretty neat learning the safari park and what we do in conservation from so many different perspectives. Originally, when I wanted to work with animals, I thought the best thing for me would be going into veterinary care. A lot of people think that, but the great thing about organizations and talks like this is that it really opens up and broadens all the things that you could do to help with conservation. There's quite a lot of different facets that you can enter, and we need all the different facets to collaborate and make these things successful. So that's how I started at the safari park. We call this field right here East Africa, and it's a giant 60-acre field where animals can go and do whatever they want, just like they would in the wild. Lots of different species interacting, and it helps us better understand and study them so we can better take care of their wild counterparts.
Right. I mean, I would love to have an office like that.
Right? It is pretty nice. It's always open for you guys to visit. We'll be here.
Yeah. Maybe you could tell us a bit about what makes San Diego Zoo Safari Park special. Some could let us know about some of the innovative scientific work that's been going on.
Sure. There's so much where to start. We'll start with rhinos because I think that's one of our biggest flagship species for the organization, and we've made a lot of work recently when it comes to conserving that species. So San Diego Zoo Global has been open this organization, our Wildlife Alliance, has been open for about 100 years now. So globally, we take care and partner with so many different organizations in order to make things successful around the world. We have more than 80 projects in more than 45 countries at the moment. And that's what makes San Diego Zoo, our Wildlife Alliance so special. We're able to make these partnerships strong and better understand what's happening on the roots and on the ground abroad. And then we take that information here and try to develop ways that we can incorporate lots of different people, lots of different cultures and backgrounds and animals in order to help with conservation. This organization is still growing, and we, during the COVID crisis and the pandemic, have faced a lot of issues when it comes to things like funding. But programs like this, where we can talk to such a wide array of people, thank goodness for social media, we're still able to continue that need for conservation education. That never stops. So that's the one thing that I love about our San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, is that not only are we a research facility, we're also a breeding facility. We have a baby rhino behind me right now. There he goes. And we're also an educational facility. So by doing everything together, by bringing in the public and getting them inspired about what we do, by working with the researchers who are, top of the line in understanding what's happening in the wild, we're able to really use all of our work. Oh, look, there's a giraffe too. We work together in order to make all these things successful. So it's a pretty amazing place, and there's always so much to learn here at our park. This is Mononasi. He's the star of a lot of our shows. A lot of the animals have different personalities too, so it's fun to get to know them and get to know them as a species.
Nice. Oh my. He knows he's on camera.
Yes, I know. He's a superstar. It's a good angle.
Yeah. Kim San from Cambodia asks, could you tell us a bit about the mental health of the rhino living in captivity?
Absolutely.
How does life look like for wildlife living in captivity? Mark from Malaysia has a similar comment. Since these animals are born in a zoo, I believe that there might be problems when reintroducing them into the wild. Back when I was working on orangutan conservation, I learned that they needed an extensive amount of time, about 10 years or so, to be with their mother and to learn essential skills on how to survive on their own in the wild. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that you guys asked those questions. Those are the tough questions when working in the field of conservation. All of us as animal lovers, of course, would want our animals to be in a pristine wild habitat like they deserve and they were naturally created for. But in the current world where humans are growing, and that's inevitable, we're slowly encroaching on their land. So one thing that's really important about zoos and conservation facilities is being open about the issues we have, but also giving people and the public a solution, something they can do or something that they can use to better understand the effects of losing animals just like this and how that can affect our ecosystem. When it comes to our animals in, human care, just like our facility here, let me just show you their apartment really quick. Look at how beautiful this is. Now, I know not all conservation facilities are like this, but animals like this for our rhinos, I mean, he's more than our 100th baby at this point. So I would say that they're pretty content with their surroundings, at least. It's a very careful line. We can't recreate the wild. But when we create zoos like this, we have to really focus on the welfare of the animal. So part of our job as specialists for wildlife, we have to be able to understand their behavior, understand when they're stressed, understand when they're content, and better create a facility that they will be able to thrive. So I would say San Diego Zoo globally is doing a really great job with helping all these animals throughout our alliance. And when it comes to introduction, and I'm glad you asked that too, because their journey doesn't end here for a lot of the animals. A lot of them get re-released to the wild. When we choose candidates, however, to go out to the wild, because there are issues with habitat and going back out to where they come from, we have to look at the threats that these animals face. Let's take rhinos, for example. Okay, we might know that rhinos are endangered because of one thing in particular, their horn. If we were to breed rhinos in a safe place and then freely reintroduce them to the wild without first foundationally changing the mindset of people and why they're important and why they have to conserve them, we'll just keep perpetuating the problem. So basically, we try to educate, start from the roots, make people understand so we can better work together. And then hopefully when things are okay and threats start to decrease for animals, if possible, we can start releasing them to the wild. I know orangutans are a little bit more complex when it comes to social dynamics and when it comes to home range. So that is a little bit more tricky. But every animal is different. And it's through collaboration, through this wildlife alliance, that we can better understand how to make that successful for each animal to ideally go back to the wild and better take care of them here in the meantime.
Right. Mark had another question. As we are experiencing a great deal of biodiversity loss, reduction of wildlands in Southeast Asia, in vitro fertilization is indeed a great way to prevent species extinction. But in the long term, will animals born through this system be stuck with a smaller gene pool?
Yeah. And that's a huge concern when it comes to conservation, right? We want everything to be diverse because a diverse world is a healthy environment. And it's a healthy world, not only for animals, but for humans too. One of the coolest things that we do here through our alliance is we have a research facility on grounds that has a frozen zoo. So if you guys have ever seen Jurassic Park, we don't have dinosaur eggs and stuff like that, but we have DNA from animals like giraffes, Przewalski horses that are endangered or even extinct in the wild for some species, stored away in a cryogenic bank. These, DNA samples can be then used to create embryos and cells that we can create more babies of different species, which is pretty amazing because a lot of these samples are years old, but they're still viable. So by having banks like this, by working with research facilities, we can bring some more genetics into the pool. Is it perfect? No. The world isn't perfect. We're still learning, but it is a really great facility that we have, and it's a really great resource that we have, and we're lucky to have as a large organization. And then we get to apply it to the animals out here. You got some animals playing in the back. It's pretty amazing though. Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite things about this park is being so close to the research and seeing all these groundbreaking things that have never been done before actually being proved successful.
Right. We have a few more questions from the fellows related to whether such breakthroughs undermine the support for conventional conservation efforts. Sothia Roth from Cambodia asks, artificial artificial insemination is a very useful way to prevent extinction, but there comes a con that makes people depend on that method instead of protecting animals in the wild instead. How do we inform this good news to people without getting the wrong idea?
Yeah, that's a very tricky part. I'm glad you asked that question. As an educator, I've met so many people that have different concerns, have different questions as to, is this the right thing to do? How is this going to be successful long term? And it's something that we're all learning, but by working at an organization that is trying to push forward and progress to help animals not, face the issues that they're currently facing, we're able to better understand how to relay this information in a sustainable way that'll, hopefully resonate long term with people. We get tours around the park to show things that we do. Just talking to people about issues that animals might face is important. But my saying as an educator is, if you bring people down a dark path, you have to bring them back to the light. It's important to express all the issues that are happening, but try to give them a solution, right? All of us want to be part of the solution. We need everybody to work together and to collaborate. And when it comes to things like AI, artificial insemination, that's something that hasn't been done very, very often, and it's something that can be misconstrued. But what we try to do is explain why it's necessary. And a quick story for the rhinos. The rhinos that we have here are called southern white rhinos in this field, but they have a cousin that you guys may have heard of called the northern white rhino. Now there's only 2 left in the world, 2 females. So they're functionally extinct, which is unfortunate. And the reason why? Humans. They have no natural predators. So at this point, it's kind of up to us to choose to save them, right? Because we're the ones that are currently watching them decline, and we are part of that. So what we do here is we have these southern white rhinos that we understand pretty well, and we have DNA from northern white rhinos in that bank that used to live here. We can take that DNA and implant it, which we have done or will be doing, into our southern white rhinos, the cousins who are very similar, and they can be the little vessel or the mom for a northern white rhino. So these are things that we have to consider as people, right? We have to be open to the idea of trying new things in order to save a species that might not have a chance otherwise. But it's not the only thing that we do, right? We let them breed naturally too. We understand them in the wild when it comes to our alliance partnerships. That way we can understand them in all different settings that we can help them survive in the future.
Right, right. Um, so for Kyra from Indonesia, she's got a question related to marine protection.
Okay.
She says, I agree that insemination may help to prevent extinction, but only at a small rate. For example,
Mm-hmm.
marine mammals and elasmobranchs branches are difficult objects to inseminate and breed. How could applied genetics or any other policy making prevent their extinction? Do you think
Mm-hmm.
only relying on marine protected areas is enough?
It's never enough, right? Of course, we always want everybody to be fully in and use all of their power as they can to do things correctly and for the benefit of not only the animals but of humans. Lawmaking is incredibly important. I mean, we have to hold people accountable. And by holding people accountable from the lawmakers to the citizens, we have to be able to express why it is crucial and important to do this. For example, wildlife trafficking, issues like that. If we're not able to express why it is detrimental to the ecosystem and why eventually it would be bad for humans to these lawmakers, it's hard to really enforce them correctly. So personally, as an educator, I think it really speaks volumes when you're able to convey why it is important, be open to share your passion, and do what you can, even if it's just protecting a habitat. I know that sounds like such a small feat, but it starts from the roots, right? I went into habitat conservation in my master's program because I realized, of course, I want to save that big rhino. I want to save that whale. But if you don't have a habitat, it's hard to make sure that they're successful. So it's okay to start from the bottom. It's okay to make small movements. Collaboratively is what we need, and we need more in our alliance. So make alliances with each other, join other nonprofits or learn from them, because by learning, we're going to be able to hopefully be more successful in talking to people and making this work.
I really agree with the fact that, you mentioned that
Mm-hmm.
building alliances is important, because what I talk about on this Breaking Silos channel is the importance of breaking out of our little
Yes.
silos and really connecting with other
Mm-hmm.
people and doing the work
Mm-hmm.
collaboratively. Um, yeah, we've got a couple of questions
Okay.
related to legal issues
Okay.
from our fellows.
Mm-hmm.
Hung from Vietnam asks, the idea of artificial insemination is familiar to people, especially scientists. Therefore, what should lawmakers do to curb the action, to prevent what should lawmakers do to prevent the negative consequences of this reproduction?
Yeah. Oh, it's difficult. Back to my previous point, and I know it sounds like I'm repeating, but making sure that people enforce it correctly and understand the reasons why. Understanding the reason why is the one main thing that really keeps things going and will ensure that this decision and will last. Um, when it comes to organizations like the San Diego Zoo Wildlife Alliance, we work with a lot of governments in order to ensure that we're doing the right thing for the welfare of our animals, because inevitably they're here working with us. They're here in a human care facility, so we have to better understand how we can create a better habitat for them. But also it involves our government. Our governments come through regularly, or like USDA will come through and check things around our facility to make sure everything's up to standard, because we do have to work together to make sure that the animals get what they deserve. Same with the people. And that stretches far, far and wide. When it comes to governments around the world, I can't speak for everybody, but I just know the importance of speaking. I know it's small. It feels like a small step to write to your lawmakers or to make a petition. These little things show that you care. How can we expect someone to love something if they don't even know the problem exists? How do we expect them to know and make action if they don't even know that it's a problem in the first place? Right. So it starts with people like us, people that might feel small, but together you can make a huge difference. And we've learned that through our alliance as we gain more partners and see how they can give us information that we might not have ever known before, whether it's from our lawmakers or from people around the world. Collaboration is key. Education is key. And those are things that you always have to repeat to yourself, even if it feels like a small step.
Brian from Myanmar had a similar comment about legal issues. He says insemination is quite cool. I'd like to know what are the law enforcements and legal actions to prevent not only wildlife species, but also the unscrupulous actions by greedy people who only care about businesses. I think this kind of lens, I mean, this is pretty much what you mentioned in response to Hang's question.
Yeah. In this world, a lot of us have learned that money runs it a lot of the time. And that's why it's important to partner up. It's important to partner up and to make noise in order to show people that this is the right path that we should be taking, and we need to allocate a lot of our energy towards it. It's not always money that starts things in movements like this. People can also start movements, and people can start small movements that gain attention, and then hopefully will collaborate into making a massive boom. I've seen lots of nonprofits start small. Our nonprofit, our San Diego Zoo, started as one tiny zoo, and then it expanded into a research facility and then a breeding facility, the San Diego Zoo Safari Park. And we're still growing out around the world. So in order to make sure that things resonate long time, it is important to just speak to others, let them know why it's important. And then hopefully people like myself and like all of you fellows that are here right now, we're sharing information and learning from each other. And that's a huge step. By not having this institute, we might not be able to, communicate with people from across the world and see the work that's happening and have that hope to want to join conservation. Because I understand it's not always positive and it's not always easy, but that's part of giving in conservation. You have to be able to open up and give and learn all the hard facts in order to make that change that we need.
Absolutely, absolutely. Definitely agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Usha from Malaysia asks, what are the main ethical challenges of in vitro fertilization in animals?
Sure. Of course, there's a lot of concerns of why don't animals breed naturally and all that stuff. And of course, like our desire to have animals live in the wild, sometimes it's not as feasible, or sometimes they do need help in order to make sure that they have a successful chance. Let's say rhinos, for example, they're pregnant for about 16 months. Okay, that's if they get pregnant.
Wow.
And at that rate of, breeding and at the rate of poaching, 3 a day, that's not sustainable at all. Of course, this isn't the perfect step. Artificial insemination, of course we want things to happen naturally, but sometimes they need our help. And when it was humans that caused a decline, it is kind of our responsibility to look elsewhere and see how can we help. The great thing about organizations like our alliance is we give animals the freedom. That's part of their welfare. They can choose what they want to do. They can choose if they want to interact with us. It's all through positive reinforcement. So by creating a relationship with animals at such a unique facility, we can basically have them participate in artificial insemination. It has happened here where animals will stand in a small area, get weighed, have an ultrasound, totally voluntarily. They can walk away whenever they want. We help each other. They make it easier for us to take care of them. We learn from them, and we're also collaborating with the animal. So ethically, we do things amazing here when it comes to the welfare of the animal. We let them choose, and we put them first.
Right, right. We have a couple of questions relating to the applicability in the developing world. Usha from Malaysia again asks, how are developing countries in Southeast Asia adapting to such technologies in protecting biodiversity and genetic variations? Would you be able to provide an example of a country in Southeast Asia that's doing this and whether it's successful?
I'll have to think about specific examples, but I can give you small ones as to how developing countries are adapting to this versus developed countries. As a large organization all the way across the world in the US, we have to be able to rely on our partners for information that we wouldn't get otherwise. That's part of our partnership. So let's take Vietnam, for example, areas that might be struck with wildlife trafficking and issues like that. We first go out there to educate. We understand the culture, right? We have to create a relationship with the community that helps us better help them, because everybody's drive to do things are completely different, right? So while the development world might have the attention of or conservation through facilities like this, without our partnerships around the world, we wouldn't be able to successfully understand the actions and steps we need to take to make these happen long term, back where they belong. So let's say an issue like wildlife trafficking, I'll bring it back to that. Let's take bear bile. Okay, we know that sun bears, if you guys are not aware, oftentimes are bred in captivity for extraction of bile for medicinal purposes. First off, a lot of this is just misunderstanding, and we have to understand that culturally, this is something that has been around forever, and they may not have had the access to the knowledge. So being patient, understanding and talking and bonding to people is how you can better change their mind or work better together. Through organizations and through partnerships, we were able to figure out synthetics, like a herbal synthetic replacement for bear bile, little things like that. I know that's not technology necessarily, but by doing things like that, by giving someone an alternative, hopefully we'll see change. We can't just go in somewhere we don't understand and say, you can't do this. That's not going to resonate with people. But by explaining to them and understanding their perspective and then giving them an alternative to make the change, that's how you're going to change. Always think forward, think, how can I help? How can I empower this person to become a steward? Sometimes it's just talking. Sometimes it's giving them another solution. But, there's always a way, as long as you're willing to look for a good way to get there.
Yeah, I love this point about giving solutions and alternatives. I mean, this really links to the previous episode we had with our previous guest, where we talked about, all these technological innovations are alternatives. You need to have some solutions and alternatives for people to make better choices. If you don't have those choices, then there's no progress to it. I mean, but by having that choice is a first step to really think about, okay, is it a good choice? Are there other choices that we can make apart from it? But that, really starts the process of really thinking dynamically about these problems.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. John from Philippines says, I really like the idea of rights of nature, where we recognize ecosystems or species as living entities with rights of their own, not just as resources. He read an article talking about this idea of rights of nature, but he's wondering whether, again, a lot of the examples are U.S. and New Zealand, in developed countries, and he just wonders whether such an adoption of such ideas is possible in a country like in Philippines, where a lot of the ecosystems are managed locally and by the community rather than nationally or federally. Did you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. It's important to not get discouraged, and you have to start small. Sometimes the smallest waves are the things that get the most attention, because these people are willing to put themselves out there to try to make the change. In my master's program, I focus on habitat restoration. That's a huge feat, right? We're losing so much land, and I'm one person. How much can I do? But when I was in Borneo, that's where I went for my trip to really apply what I had learned. I worked with the smallest community, a village of just ladies, and they decided, we're going to reconnect this fragmented habitat. Just a group of about 5 women, and they went in and they planted trees between the fragmented habitat. Years later, orangutan used that area. It's starting small, and the nice thing about partnerships and institutes like this is you are currently making those partnerships. You're making those connections with people. You'll find people that have different perspectives but want the same mission and goal. And that way you're able to do things, with more gusto. You're able to do things with better understanding so that you can be successful and it can last long term, right? Because we want things to last long term. So it's all about getting all the perspectives. Don't be shy. Conservation is always changing. You have to be flexible, be open, be understanding, be patient. And inevitably, I think everybody can get there. Of course, changing people's minds isn't easy, but it starts with talking.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised if after this you get a few more of the fellows reaching out to you to ask more questions.
No, I'm always here. I mean, we have to talk. And I've always promised myself, if I make it to a place that I love and I'm inspired and fulfilled, I'm going to help everybody I can, because we need people. This isn't just a job, it's a lifestyle. And it's something we all need, and it'll benefit everybody across the board, here, afar, animals, people.
Right. A last question from our fellows from Trisha in the Philippines. I am particularly interested in the concept of bioabundance. Although I am aware that this will take almost 2 centuries to fully complete, I want to know if there's anything that citizens can start doing or practicing in relation to this. What
Yeah.
roles can citizens take on in our efforts to restore bioabundance in key biodiversity areas?
Yeah. I'm glad you asked that. It feels like it's almost impossible because it's a whole thing against one person. But if we all change our mindset, that we can make a little bit of a difference, I do believe that we can get there. Yes, it's going to be a long time. And that's why I started to focus on habitat restoration, right? I could have chosen any animal, any focus, but figured why not start at the bottom, start small. When it comes to your home, whether it's here in San Diego for me or if it's across the world in Singapore, starting in your own backyard is okay. Restoring that habitat, creating an area where animals do have a refuge to go if they need to. Planting native plants. Little things like this really do connect and inspire people to better consider the ecosystem around us. We're all connected. By inevitably moving into animal habitats, we have altered the ecosystem, but by understanding what is needed at our home, what we can do for our animals, I think those little changes will hopefully make a big one. I know bioabundance has been declining rapidly and it feels like a losing battle, but when it comes to conservation facilities and big partners and alliances like ours, you can see all the work that's happening in safe places, and we are prepared when the time is ready to release animals to the wild and to really change the minds of people. And we work on that every day. And that's why we love doing education segments like this, because without expressing all the stuff that we're doing in our research, it's going to stop right there, right? The line ends there if we don't communicate. Once again, we teach for the income, the outcome, not the income, because eventually with everybody working together, it'll be better for our ecosystem, for people, for our organization, and more. And we'll just keep pushing
Right,
forward.
right. Sorry, that was not the last question from the
No, it's
bills.
okay.
There's one more
It's okay.
from
Sure.
Ruli Azwa from Indonesia, and he's relating the issues that he faces in North Sumatra and Aceh.
Okay.
He says that poor people that live beside conservation areas, they think that living near conservation areas is a benefit because they can take advantage of the forest
Yeah.
products.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been going for generations, to get, monetary benefits. And this happens in their national park of Lusa, which
Yep.
is in Aceh.
Mm-hmm.
So he was just trying to relate these issues. Um, how can we, how can this problem be solved? Uh, is this problem only solved by simply promoting understanding and the function of conservation areas? What is the alternative for sustainable development to avoid, further extinction?
Yeah. I think it's incredibly important to understand and teach. I've said that over and over again, and I'm sure you guys know that by coming to things like this, asking questions, learning and teaching yourselves. But it's not only understanding, we have to include people. I know it's difficult to include people with such different perspectives where you can't understand. It's so hard to understand where they're coming from, but they think the same about us. I've worked with organizations, and within the safari park as well, has worked with a lot of communities where we go out and try to understand the drive for people. The drive for people is always different, whether it's money, whether it's for their family, whether it's for greed, whether it's for the love of animals. People do things for different reasons. So by including people and by talking things out, I think we'll be able to make a bigger difference. I'm sorry, she had mentioned that. What was the second part of your question that she had
Um,
mentioned?
Hang on, I just lost it
It's
now.
okay. I just want to make sure that I'm hitting all her points. It's a good
uh,
question. Oh, like taking advantage of diversity areas.
yeah, yeah. And that's
So
something that's already done for generations and they see it part
yeah.
of local practice.
hmm when we teach all audiences, adults, kids, and so forth and so on. Teaching the youth is really important too, because kids will go home to their families and share that information regardless if their parents want to hear it, right? That's also teaching. There's a huge conflict with biodiverse areas and trying to preserve them. It's like a race against time. A lot of organizations like ours have created either educational areas or educational sessions where we can go out to these communities, people that are next to these habitats that we need to preserve, and we share things with them. A lot of these people have never seen the wildlife in their own backyard. If you think about your backyard right now in Singapore or, abroad, Vietnam, Sumatra, can you think of all the wild animals that are in that area? Have you seen them yourself? Do you know the importance? A lot of us might not. And that's exactly the same reasoning and behind a lot of these people that might not understand the impact that they have on wildlife and the ecosystem. Just as helping people understand that they are empowered to make a difference, make them proud of the animals and the wildlife that they live in, because yes, it is biodiverse, and there's very few biodiverse hotspots that are so unique. So sharing with them what you're losing is not just a beautiful background to look at, but it's the health of our ecosystem in our world. Just talking things out. I know things have happened for generations, but it's our generation and the future ones that are going to try to push us past that. It's all about understanding, and there's lots of alternatives now. So I believe that by changing the mind of lawmakers to help preserve that, hold people accountable for doing things like poaching for greed, etc., and then supporting organizations like our alliance that go out to teach people. I know it sounds like a small step, but changing the minds and slowly working together to enforce laws, to help people understand, to protect, that's how we're going to make this mission possible. The goal is to hit all perspectives, hit all areas. And if our area is teaching, we're going to teach and we're going to change minds.
Right. Excellent points there. I think just to sum up, and these couple of questions are what I always ask guests on the Breaking Silos channel. What does breaking silos mean to you, and what advice would you give someone who wants to break silos in addressing environmental challenges?
Yeah. Follow your passion. Always follow your passion, even if it's the smallest step. Don't be afraid to give. By giving and showing people that you're here to make a difference, I think people will start opening up too. Whether or not they take the power to open up and make your own change, or if they open up just to hear what you have to say, you are making a difference. For me, breaking silos, I literally think of a silo, a giant structure that holds everything in place. By breaking that open and letting everything spill out into different people, into different regions, into different perspectives, into different projects, that's the beauty of it, spilling out into different people, letting it happen naturally and seeing where everything goes towards a common goal. I think we'll be able to work together to make sure that it happens, where everybody and their own specialty can really bring something to the table that will make us successful long term. And for me, I love teaching and taking care of the animals here and learning. And I've seen so many eyes light up just talking about the issues and what they can do throughout the years I've been here. And that's something that will keep driving me to do more. And I hope it drives you guys to do more. Never stop asking questions, because that's how we learn. Always be open, keep communicating, and we'll hopefully, progress together quickly.
I love that. I totally love that. Thank you, Lauren.
Of course, my pleasure.
This has been a great conversation, even though it's really short. I know you've got quite a bit of work to do with your colleagues at the back there.
Yeah.
So, thank you, Lauren, once again for your time and sharing with us, all the insights from working in conservation and all the great work that San Diego Zoo Safari Park has been doing. Mm-hmm. So yeah, folks, there's more information on what Lauren is doing in San Diego Zoo. Links in the description below, and I'm sure you all got a lot out of this as much as I did. And so thank you, Lauren, and your colleagues in the background.
Yes.
From me, Sophia Jamil, and Lauren Lee, and the wonderful animals at the San Diego Zoo and Safari Park, thanks for watching, and see you next time.
Bye, guys.